to In the Hot Seat. I'm Meg Muir. It's good to be with you. Today we have a really special guest on the show. With me is Grace Sharkey. Grace is a proclaimed freight tech nerd, so I'm super excited to unpack that with you today, Grace. But you're also a staff writer at FreightWaves, and you host a show on SiriusXM called Drive Time. So we're just really excited that you've joined us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Honestly, this is one thing I'm very passionate about in this industry too. Is just women that are, in the front lines getting stuff done, and big fan of everything happening over at the Tenney Group. And then, of course, this is like the first female interview I've had over the last month, so
Oh,
I'm
well,
feeling
good deal.
comfortable and ready to go.
Well, you're a professional, so we're excited for the interview. I just want to start off learning a little bit more about you and your background. Maybe talk to us about how you got into your line of work and also at FreightWaves.
Yeah, so I will say I think I'm like a lot of people in this industry where if you asked me in college if this is what I would be doing, it would be probably not. That's how we all kind of stumble into logistics in some way.
True.
Uh, I wanted to go actually into nonprofit work, but when I graduated, I had loans to pay, and I was like, well, um, nonprofit doesn't pay those loans
Sure.
back. So
Yeah, sure.
I knew about logistics. I used to fundraise for Michigan State as a student for scholarships, various
Oh,
programs, and C.H. Robinson, TQL, a lot of companies would come
mhm.
and recruit us because we were used
Sure.
to hearing no on the phone, right? Like uh,
Absolutely. Sure.
a lot of resiliency built up, and in talking with people and finding out, what their passions were. So I knew a lot of people that went into the industry, and I wanted to go into it, but I wanted to find something that was more long term. And so I actually linked up with the founder of a logistics company called Fifth Wheel Freight.
Okay.
I was the second employee there. We
Oh, wow.
ended up recruiting a number of my friends, even from college and in the
Wow.
fundraising space, and we built that startup from a handful of us to about 100 employees and
Wow.
$80 million in revenue over about 8.5 years. And
That's
uh,
amazing.
yeah, talk about getting a business degree through real life work. And that's,
Experience. Yeah.
yeah, incredible
Absolutely.
experience. And
Absolutely.
so that's what got me into it. And uh, quickly from there, I decided to step out and start consulting. I had a couple of friends that are looking to start trucking companies and just interested in the space. It was right about that 2020 time where we started to get a little bit hotter, and this industry became a little bit more sexy for those out there. And a friend of mine, along with Juner and a number of people at FreightWaves, had brought up me coming over there and writing about freight tech. And it was a passion of mine in my previous role as a strategy officer in operations. And so I jumped on board, started writing, and then quickly started doing podcasts, and then quickly started doing the radio show as well. And I love the pirate ship we have over there, and just this like passion. Everyone's so passionate about spreading the good and unfortunate news of this industry, and it's just
Sure.
such a wonderful culture that I'm so happy to be a proud of.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's such a well-known and well-recognized organization. Dooner, you mentioned. I mean, what a fun person to interview with. His content and the things that he produces are really fun to follow and watch. So, no, that's
Yeah.
great. So, talk to us a little bit about freight tech and really what interests you most in that space.
I think it started from my roots in operations and really strategizing in that business, how
Mhm.
to, I don't like to say do more with less, but become more efficient.
Yeah.
This industry is just overwhelmed with manual labor and work that
Mhm.
can easily be done by technology that's been available for at least a decade now
Yeah.
in other industries. You'll get finance and
Yeah.
of course utilizing, I mean, just even the way you utilize the internet. I mean, when I first started, like, we were faxing
Oh, yeah.
and sending and writing manual like BOLs, and it was just like
Oh,
I,
yeah. Yeah.
I get very anxious when things aren't operating in the way that they need to operate, or at least in a more efficient way. And I think
Yeah.
more so, I'm a people person. So when I see people struggling through operations or not being able to reach their sales goals because something is holding them back or lagging,
Sure.
like I want to jump in and fix that.
Fix it. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the tech side that naturally came as a place to look. So at that job, I mean, I interviewed with so many different tech companies, looking at the solutions that were available out there,
Sure.
implemented a lot of them, a lot of the big names that are being used today, and when it comes to even just change management and culture of adding tech, like it all really fascinates me. So that's that. I think it's the problem solver in me that's really interested in how freight tech's going to change our industry over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's grown so much over such a short period of time too. It's really been interesting to kind of follow along and understand the enhancements and advancements that are being made in that space. And it's also, I think, unique and interesting because it's just so fragmented, right? And so,
Oh, geez, yeah,
you think about key players, whether it's TMS or WMS or CRMs or ERPs, and there are key players in that space already that really occupy the vast majority of market share. And then
yeah,
you have this subset of all these cutting edge new technology companies coming in and doing various things within the transportation space. It's really fascinating, I think, to watch and understand how people are going to be adjusting and acclimating and implementing some of these new technologies into their organization. So maybe with that, talk a little bit about freight tech, the need to prove itself in certain ways, and the maturation process from your point of view.
yeah. I want to tie this into something that you just said too. There's a lot of legacy players, especially when you want to look at management systems and
Sure.
and ELDs and all of the
Yeah.
carrier systems and things like that, load boards too. Uh,
Sure.
you see these key players that maybe haven't focused on some of the newest technology that we're seeing, right? Like
Sure.
when especially TMSs, like dynamic
Mhm.
pricing capabilities.
Yeah.
A big one that we all, I think, watching what happened with Convoy, of course, is
Mhm.
automating load matching. I mean, that's you could say digital freight broker. We could get into that, but really the core of what they're doing is the digital freight matching, allowing the humans to take care of the exceptions and just
Sure.
that initial connection being done tech wise, which I think we all, if we really want to look in our souls and look at how we book vacations and how we, I mean, even
Yeah.
book cabs and things of that nature, like that's how we prefer to do things. And so I think those areas though still, because of how you brought this up, how fragmented the industry is, I
Sure.
think we still haven't seen, at least on more of a small and medium sized scale business wise, how this could be adapted to our operations today. It
Mhm.
is possible. We just had Brad Jacobs right talk at
Mhm.
our F3 event, and he said RXO is sitting at over 90%. I want to say he said 95% of loads are digitally matched. There's no human interaction. So we are looking, it
Incredible.
is possible to get to, right?
Sure.
But
Yeah.
you look at someone like RXO and their culture's deep in technology. So that's one.
Absolutely.
How do we get people to say, you know what, we need to change and we need to, that also comes with changing incentives, how we're incentivizing players in the brokerage space. So when I say that, I think we still have need time to watch a lot of, like I'd say freight matching in particular grow.
Sure.
The future's there, but I think
Yeah.
as a culture we need to still work it into our nature of work.
Yeah.
And I mean, even like I was explaining to someone the other day, like when you onboard a carrier, how many times does a carrier tell you I go everywhere? Well, that hurts an algorithm because you
Yeah.
don't go
Sure.
everywhere. Like, yeah, you know, you
Absolutely. Sure.
you're not going to Maine every weekend. There might be a
Yep.
few carriers that do, but you don't. And
Yeah.
so there's that, like, I think it's this like over time, and I'm in a lot of really great discussions with carriers and brokers and shippers too, who it's starting to click. They're starting to
Yeah.
understand their position, right? Like in how making especially freight matching work on
Sure.
a higher level. So I think we're getting there. It's
Yeah.
just we still need to figure out how we're incentivizing and paying our employees. We still need to figure out how we're, I mean, even incentivizing carriers, right, to download these applications. So
Yeah.
we're,
Sure.
again, the future's there. we just need to, I think, be a tad bit more patient and a little less finger pointing at those who have tried and maybe in our eyes have failed.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And I think you also made a comment about change management, and that entire facet of an organization might be more prevalent, right, in your top carriers and a very
Yeah.
familiar part of how they do business. But you think about the majority of over the road transportation carriers or even brokers out there, change management and incorporating change management personnel and expertise internally is probably not something historically that they've had a lot of experience doing. And so I think the ability to make sure that you match change management with the evolution of the technology needs with the organization, it's such an important pairing in successful launch of new technology. So I think that was a good comment that you made as well. So what about marketing? As you think about freight technology and the way these companies go to market, what are your insights around maybe some of the things that is, they're doing well in that space, but also areas of opportunity, right? Where can things go wrong with freight tech and marketing and their go-to-market strategies?
Yeah, I think, and I see this a lot in the work that I do, especially when people come and maybe pitch stories or have new
Mm.
systems that they are interested in having us cover. Uh,
Yeah.
for me, and I don't know why our industry struggles with this, but really explaining the use cases and showcasing.
Mm.
I think some people are sometimes are afraid of maybe losing a customer or being exposed, or I mean, you probably know this more than others. Just once you are in the investment arena, there's only so much that you can really showcase and talk about.
Sure.
So I think that they get trapped in this bubble. But I think what's, especially from my point of view, and seeing ads and especially press releases, things of that nature, is like really dive into the problems that you're solving and
Hmm.
how that's changed or progressed the company over time. One of my favorite, I would say, strategies or kind of like a campaign that recently I did cover
Hmm.
was, I believe, Optimal Dynamics is working with BCB Transport, and they
Okay.
did like a full kind of exposure of their beta with them. And then this
Oh,
included the bad stuff, right? Like
sure.
how hard it was to, at the beginning, to get dispatchers to understand that they might not be making the best choices, right? And showcasing that this could work. Like they were explaining that on Tuesdays, they would call it, I think, like Tech Tuesdays, where no
Hmm.
matter what, you weren't able to go around the system. You had to match your drivers to what the system told you to match, and they
Sure.
quickly saw an increase in revenue and what these trucks were able to bring in. And
Sure.
so I just thought it was such a great way to, of course, maybe sell your product, but it also showcased the hardship of change management, something we talked about, because I
Yeah.
think that's somewhere where people aren't honest. Whenever I talk to someone and they say, "Oh, this system didn't work for me," my first question is, "How did you implement it?" Right?
Of
So
course. Yeah.
they
Sure.
showcased that a little bit, but then they also, had the president CEO of the trucking company explaining, that he was wrong, and that's what I think sometimes we want everything to be so perfect, and
Sure.
but human stories and are what really connect us. And I kind of like
Yeah.
it's ironic because a lot of times the pushback, especially when it comes to freight matching, is that this is a human-led industry, like that will never change. But then when it
Yeah.
comes to the marketing, where is that sentiment? So I
No.
think
Interesting. Yeah.
you know what I mean. It confuses me, and I just hope people, do webinars, do
Sure.
podcasts like this, showcase to people the human stories that we all
Right.
agree are there. And I think that you'll see people understand, audience understand, oh, wow, I deal with that problem every single day and it drives me
Sure.
bonkers. I got to hear you out. And so that's just, I think I'd love to see more of that from our industry. Right now, it's like a lot of, here's some stats, trust us, it's right. I have my dentist in town. I laugh because he has a billboard that says, like, number one dentist in Lansing, but he has an asterisk that says voted by his own team. And it like makes me, it's like, that reminds me of like Freight Tech, where it's like, who even is giving you the best of,
Rating. Yeah,
remarks. And
sure.
so say, just get it back to the human element. Do
Sure.
podcasts, do webinars, showcase to people the problems you're truly solving for people, and I think you'll see a better outcome.
Yeah, no, I love that. The learnings from the failures
Yeah,
is a really important part of showcasing what the tools and products can do for your organization. And that whole element of benchmarking with peers, right? And sharing
yeah,
best practices. We've kind of gotten away from that. Years ago, that used to be pretty mainstream, right? Where sharing best practices and making sure that you were benchmarking on a regular basis. That was part of operating a lot of these companies. And so, yeah, kind of getting back, like you said, to that human element is so important for continued growth and improvement within our organization. So, no, that's great. So let's talk a little bit about, and I'll just toss you a curveball here. And I also want to talk about themes, future themes in 2024. So I'll start with the themes. There's a lot of great information coming out. Obviously, FreightWaves, your products, the way you aggregate data and your content, it's unbelievable. So let's start off talking about 2024 key themes that you're seeing, you're hearing about, your teams are talking about in terms of freight tech for next year.
yeah. I think there's probably three major ones, and maybe one that might surprise you, might
Okay.
anger the audience a little bit. But
Yeah.
one, I'm going to go with carriers. Carrier, one of our top 25 companies this year was Best Pass,
Mhm.
and I think that, and they were number four, and I
Wow.
think that showcases the need to help these carriers get technology that will make them more efficient to get through the markets that we're seeing today. I
Sure.
don't think that we see anything coming back to quote unquote normal, however we want to even define that,
Yeah.
until at least the summertime. And honestly, I'm probably a tad bit more pessimistic than most.
Sure.
But what we have seen here at FreightWaves is just honestly drivers not falling out of the market, which means that they are watching their pennies, doing everything that they know and have learned through the years of being in this industry to make sure that they survive. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
imagine that, with the added technology to make them even more, their cash flow even more positive, help them make better pricing decisions. I think we see that more and more, especially the pricing aspect now. I can't tell you how many times I've dealt with carriers or so, oh, this the broker just told me this lane's going for $1 a mile. But I think the carrier audience is starting to understand, well, that could have been a back haul to get them to $4 a mile. They're starting to understand the dynamics a little bit more of
Sure.
the industry. So I think that makes them more um, better at investing in technology to make their businesses a lot more efficient. So companies
Yeah.
like Best Pass, Relay, I think a lot of these payment
Hmm.
systems, Duke AI, these like background systems that will help make sure that they get paid on time, that their paperwork is in order, that
Sure.
it's drivers not just sitting on a BOL for 3 weeks, and that revenue and that profit's not coming in. So I think we'll see a little bit more into the carrier side, and especially with all the risk analysis going on right now with fraud in the industry.
Yeah.
They want to protect themselves more than ever. So,
Absolutely.
anything that's going to prove that they're doing their job right, I think we'll see more investment in. I think the other one, and this kind of goes off of the broker or the carrier side, is just even more focus on um, payments, but with the risk aspect applied to it, right? So watching for fraud, making sure that the bills are coming in, that they're getting paid on time, especially on the logistics provider side. So,
Hmm.
um, uh, of course, I think Triumph Pay is one of the biggest in our industry that's doing
Yep.
that. But you also see OTR solutions coming out with some really great technology. Um, there's APRL is another really
Hmm.
great company that I love to watch. Really smart team over there too. So Denim is another great one. The Transflow, right? I
Hmm.
think
Sure.
watching these companies, I think are going to have a really fun 2024. Um,
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Sure.
it's off the backs of people not having the great time in the logistics provider space. But I think those investments will start to really pay off. My last one, and honestly, this kind of came to me last night during the radio show. This is like a nice, fresh, hot take for everyone out there.
Perfect.
Uh, ESG initiatives, emissions calculating. I mean, we've got California that's got a lot of really strong regulations coming in next year.
Yeah.
We have the SEC that's knocking on people's doors asking for what their companies or global footprints are. And
Sure.
I think what people don't understand in this industry is that sure, maybe someone like Anheuser-Busch has a huge team behind it who's doing this and this work and knows, what their direct emissions are. But when
Hmm.
it comes to like the scope 3 and following the supply chain,
Yeah.
I get very nervous that there's going to, with carriers already having problems, that one day Walmart or someone's going to knock on your door and say, hey, to continue taking this load and contracting this load from us, we need you to send us a monthly emissions report on your business as a whole. And my fear is a lot of them are going to be like, what? Like I don't even know where to start. I don't know how to calculate that
Yeah.
accurately. And they'll get kicked out quickly, right? Like, and if anything, we've heard from at least from Biden in the last couple of years how much they want to 2030, right? These big goals that we set as a country
Yeah. Sure.
to bring down our carbon footprint. And I just think the tech is so far behind right now where it needs to be. So I'm very interested as these regulations start to hit next year
Yeah.
what we start to see come out, what companies are coming out with some really great solutions. I mean, there's even stuff that we've lightly worked on and promoted this last year in that space.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
um,
No,
that
I
I
think
think,
that's a good one, Grace, because even
yeah,
on whenever you mention the even you think of electric, right, and battery recycling programs and companies that are playing specifically in that space, like it's really interesting to kind of follow and watch how are they going to be compliant and as quickly as the regulations are coming out, right? Because
exactly.
it's evolving quick. And then ESG, like you said, I mean, obviously there's the whole DEI elements, but the carbon footprint and emission side of it, I'm just fascinated to watch kind of this race to who is going to take share in terms of aggregating that information or being the first to say, yes, we've kind of hitched ourselves to these top retailers or these top shippers. And then there's generally a few companies that make it and all of a sudden integrate coast to coast, right? And so I know EcoVadis is in it, and there's some other key players in it that are really trying to grow in that space. And I agree. I think that pairing will happen, right? Where companies won't have to just report it at 10,000 feet, but on a more granular basis. I think that's coming, certainly.
Yeah, and quickly, right? Like I think that's
Yeah,
it's not going to be something where it's like, oh yeah, give us a month, we'll get that to you. Like they're going to want a click of a button that answer, right? And
sure.
so,
Absolutely.
who's going to come in and handle that? I'm excited to report on.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see what companies do with that data, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, we see it a lot from an RFP perspective, of course, but what are going to be some of the outputs of receiving that information, and how are they going to utilize that locally within their communities and in other ways? I think it's going to be interesting to kind of watch what they do with that information.
For sure. I love
Well,
I love that
wonderful.
statement. I do want to say that, I started talking about how my original work was in nonprofit work. And I
Yeah.
love that you said it that way because I think when we do focus on some of these emissions areas, we're going to see a lot of communities get healthier and that's what I get very excited about too. I mean, I'm in Michigan, Detroit, right? Auto
Mhm.
manufacturing is huge.
Sure.
GM in particular is working on some really great green initiatives, and I'm
Hmm.
excited over time to see how that helps Detroit, just overall healthcare evolve as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned a curveball, and I know you haven't prepped for this, but I'm just really curious, and I like to ask guests this question. You've got your crystal ball, and you're looking at the next 10 years. Talk to me about the biggest change that you see if you look into your crystal ball, specifically for transportation, from your perspective.
So, and I feel better about saying this too because again, Jacobs brought this up at F3, and it's something
Yeah.
that people keep talking about, and honestly, we have reported too at FreightWaves in regards to like using sonar. I think
Yeah.
a brokerage will look completely different, and
Mhm.
the role of the salesperson and the carrier person will be either completely eliminated or transformed into something so different. I
Yeah,
mean,
sure.
think about it. It kind of reminds me of like the best analogy I like try to make for people that might not be able to wrap their head around that is like the stock markets back in the day. When we got the actual technology behind it to not have so many people watching the movement of markets all day, how much
Yeah.
quicker those transactions became.
Yeah,
And I mean,
decisions were being made. Yeah, sure.
yeah, and then even into like Robinhood, how now, right,
Mhm.
there's this like everyone has an opportunity. It's so less it's democratized that everyone
Yeah.
can come in and have a piece of that pie too. And
Yeah.
that's the one thing I get really excited about as we start to culturally understand, okay, listen, like what we're doing as a broker isn't just matching these two. Let's automate that. Let's get that over with.
Mhm.
But watching the dynamics of pricing throughout different market swings and conditions, and being able
Absolutely.
to like make uh some type of forecast, knowing weather patterns and things of that nature, like
Yeah.
it's going to become, I think, the like right now a top broker is a really good sales dude in his like mid 20s, like making a ton of money. And I think it's going
Absolutely.
to turn into kind of like what a trader is today, where it's
Yeah.
no, you're an analytics guy now. Like the
Sure.
freight tech nerds are going to rise, and it's going to be less of a
Yeah.
sales bro and more of a analytics
Yeah.
provider, or
Sure.
uh, 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 an analyst, right? Overall,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that is like my. I sometimes wish we could flash forward and kind of be like, no, see, like this is what this is gonna do, um,
Sure.
but that's, I think, a brokerage, what an average brokerage looks like today will just be like, we'll laugh about
Vastly
it
different.
10 years from
Yeah.
now.
So
Yeah.
neat. Yeah, it's neat to think about. Well, Grace, I really appreciate all your time today. Thanks so much for being on the show. Loved your insights and really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you.